Welcome to Christ the Lord Clearwater's weekly message. I'm Pastor John Backus here in our studio in Clearwater, Florida, where we share the good news of Jesus on the Gulf Coast. You're joining us for week 4 of our series, Focused. Today we'll see that focused living properly values earthly assets. Really the idea is when wanting and having get out of whack. When wanting and having get out of whack. Now there's good news today because as you work through this content with me, you're going to level up in your wisdom. You're going to gain skill and the dexterity needed to get through life in a wise way. Life doesn't automatically go well. It doesn't automatically lay out blessings for you and end up in a good place. But it's like an obstacle course. There's all these problems that we have to endure and overcome and get past. Almost like life is a version of American Ninja Warrior, where there's an obstacle course and I've got to reach for this and jump to that and time this and lift up that and climb. And we actually meet Jesus today talking about how to be focused in life and have this skill and dexterity and strength to make it to a path of blessing in not an obstacle course of physical challenges, but in an obstacle course of bodies. In the history of Jesus' life in Luke chapter 12, we're told that many people were coming to Jesus because they wanted something that he had. They valued the information assets and the wisdom he was providing them. We're told that there was such a large crowd there that they were trampling on each other. They were in danger not just from being unsafe from crowd pressure, but also from wrong ideas. Jesus was speaking at that time about flawed thinking, wrong values, not just muscle, but people who had social authority and would use it improperly and wrongly, so wrong influences. And at this moment, as there's physical shoving and pushing, and this, at this time, very popular, wise teacher, Jesus, was discussing the approach to many of life's problems. Luke the historian chooses to interject in this chapter of a personal interaction between Jesus and a man. And in this interaction, we'll gain some focus about how it looks when wanting and having get out of whack. We're going to be more focused on properly valuing earthly assets. So as we talk about this interaction, you'll see two things, and I'm going to follow these two words throughout this whole message. One is the idea of wanting, and the other is the idea of having. Wanting, when there's something outside of you that you value, you hope you can find a way to have it. So wanting is what captivates your mind. It's what your body longs for. It's what you daydream about. It's what you scheme to get. It's your appetite. It's your hungers. And having is that particular asset, to use financial terms, a real thing that you can own and call your own. Not just a concept out there, but when the concept becomes real and you can have it, it's yours. When wanting and having, valuing something and holding it as an asset, that's kind of the goal. That's the end goal of the American Ninja obstacle course that is this life. If my want is hunger, the have is food. If I value what calories can offer me, the asset is trail mix. If I want happiness, I try to have, well, whatever you might fill in the blank is the asset that would lead you to happiness. If you value being relaxed or a sense of security or safety, then the asset you need or you long for is, well, what is it? What do you want if you hope to have happiness? What asset could give you relaxation and peace and security? Well, these ideas about wanting and having, about values and assets, again, is what we'll meet in Luke chapter 12. Now, Luke, again, is describing this interaction between Jesus and a real guy. And a real guy out of this hustling, bustling, pushing crowd, he's a real person. He had some money and family problems. See, I told you he was a real person. Sounds true to life, doesn't it? Money problems, relationship problems, some hard feelings in the family. I told you he was real. This guy has money and family problems. He feels cheated out of an inheritance by his brother. Now think about what are the wants and the haves, the values and the assets. He values that asset. That asset is the inheritance, and he wants it, but he doesn't hold it. His brother is holding it, and he wants it. And that leads this man to another course of action. This guy comes and he calls out to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me." Do you notice another want and have, another mismatch between a value and an asset? What did the guy want? He wanted justice. And the person holding justice, he thought, may have been Jesus, who had definitely influence and clout. So he called out to Jesus, "Jesus, I want justice. So give me your attention and give me your authority and help me solve this family dispute." Okay, so how are we doing so far? We want to learn about wisdom. We want to learn about properly valuing, about living focused by properly valuing earthly assets. Are you kind of seeing clearly here what good and bad things are happening, or is it still blurry? Let's review. So, a good thing, a man wants justice. All right. Another good thing, he asks Jesus for help. That's prayer. Ask and it'll be given to you. Seek and you'll find. I mean, these are good, right? God says share, and God commands prayer, share and prayer. So he comes to Jesus for justice, talking about sharing in an act of prayer, and he says, "Please help." And Jesus' response is this: "Man, who appointed me arbiter or judge between you?" All right, put on the brakes here. It's almost like Jesus is upset with this man. He responds to that man's question not with a solution, but with another question, a rhetorical question, which means he thinks everybody knows the answer because it's obvious. His question is, "Who appointed me the lawyer between you and your brother?" And the answer, you should be able to figure it out with me, is nobody did. It's like Jesus kind of leading him to understand, "I'm sorry, guy. You love justice, you love sharing, you know what prayer is, but you've got the wrong guy. It is not my department to solve your family legal disputes." It's like that Wendy's meme from a while back. Somebody has this big problem or this big statement about the way the world should work, and they're pictured in the comic frame like speaking all their mind on what's wrong with the world, and then the next frame shows a fast food worker behind the counter saying, "Sir, this is a Wendy's. What you're talking about isn't appropriate to the circumstance we're in." I'm not here for that, Jesus was saying. I'm not here for that. So Jesus wanted the man to know that this guy asking for legal backup had some things blurry. Like, though it wasn't wrong to want justice, talk about properly sharing and to come to God in prayer, though those things are not wrong, there was still something blurry, and it had to do with why the man valued Jesus and what assets Jesus could bring that would meet that man's wants. Now, right then, it's almost as if a camera frame shifts, and we go from this crowd with this kind of yelling interaction between a man and the hustle and bustle of Jesus. And Luke, after describing that situation, focus is now on Jesus, who's talking to his disciples, and using that as a cue or a transition, he'll start a teaching story, a parable, using that as the inspiration or the theme. At least I think that's what's going on. Maybe it's a little bit blurry for me as we as we hear this parable of the rich fool, I wonder, could you help me focus? Could you, if I'm the guy trying to get through the American Ninja obstacle course, trying to figure out how to do life right, to be focused, not bleary, to know how wants and haves stay, how to keep wanting and having from being out of whack. If I'd want to be an American Ninja Christian, not an American Ninja warrior, can you help me get there? Guide me through this. I'll read the Bible quotes and then see if you can figure out what to make of this teaching story. Here it is. Jesus said, "The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest." Okay, I'll stop there. Can you guide me through this? Let's focus here. Is farming good or bad? Is it successful farming that might be good or bad? This is pretty good, right? A man has a job and it's productive and it produces food, which we need, and he's good at his job. So this is good, right? Farming, pretty good. Okay. Then Jesus said, "This farmer thought to himself, 'What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops.'" Now we have a little bit of problem. It's almost like there's too much success. The man is thinking about where he's going to put his bumper crop. Now, thinking isn't bad, right? And having a successful crop isn't bad. The man is aware of this, so he's paying attention to his business. He's not an idiot. He's discerning, and he starts to problem solve. He's using his brain. That's good, right? Verse 18, then this farmer said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain." Is there anything out of whack here? If you have extra food from your meal, you put it in your refrigerator or you freeze it for later. Saving it, not wasting it. So you have a meal down the road, you may put extra supplies in your hurricane kit in Florida, store some extra water. You might have more clothes than can fit in the drawer, so you put them in your closet. You might be in a company that has extra inventory, so you keep it in a warehouse. Does anything sound out of whack here? Having and wanting, and refrigerators, closet savings, warehouses. Let's keep going. "And I, the farmer, the rich man, I'll say to myself, 'You have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry.'" Is there anything out of whack here? A man who is successful in business, enjoying the fruit of his labor, not stealing it, but he earned it, and finally being able to say, "I made it to retirement. Now I can take a load off and finally have relaxing retirement of some good years." Retirement, is that out of whack as far as we know? Retirement, good or bad? Well, that seems to be okay. So we've stacked a couple things we've noticed, whether it's in the interaction of Jesus and this guy with family money problems, or whether it's Jesus' own story. There's lots of good things here. There's a man calling for justice, talking about sharing. He's coming to Jesus in prayer. Then Jesus tells a parable, and it's about a successful businessman using his brain to do some planning, to do some storing, to look ahead to the future when he can relax and enjoy the life he built for himself. So all of these things are good. But then God says to him in Jesus' story, verse 20, "But God says to him, 'You fool.'" All right. Right there, I feel like if life isn't an obstacle course and I'm an American Ninja Warrior, a Christian, trying to jump from idea to idea and get everything right, this is a jump that I don't know if I can quite make. How was the farmer a fool? Like a fool is lazy. A fool doesn't know how to run his business. A fool doesn't plan. A fool just makes decisions that wreck himself, ruin his life. And this man, this farmer, is not doing any of that. Why is he a fool? Suppose if we look back, we could explore a short statement that Jesus inserted at the beginning, just before the story. He told that man with family financial problems, he said, "Be on your guard against greed. Watch out for it. Watch out for greed." So apparently this parable and what was going on in that man's life, as well as the rich farmer's life, was somehow about wanting and having being out of whack, about greed. And it's not possessions that are wrong, whether it's grain or having an inheritance, but though possessions aren't wrong, if we value them inappropriately, then we get all of life wrong. In other words, a wise life is closely related to our ability to make proper value assessments about assets that we hold or work to hold. So even though justice is good and prayer is good and refrigerators and storing and business success is good, wanting and having was still out of whack. So what was the problem? Well, it's revealed in the end of Jesus' teaching story where God says, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you." He's going to die. And after he's dead, the question, then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? What's going to happen to all these assets that you wanted? You wanted them so strongly that you worked to get them and save them and store them. What's going to happen to those assets when you die? And here's where the rich farmer became a fool. His plan was work for the stuff. Step 2, enjoy the stuff. But here's how reality panned out, which he didn't take into account. He worked for the stuff, but he never enjoyed it because, unexpectedly, he became dead. And all that was left of the story was all this stuff in his barn. And what happened to all these assets that were so valuable to him? He worked for the stuff, but then he got dead. So now who holds the assets? Somebody else gets them. You earned them, you don't get them, somebody else does. Solomon, the wise king of the Old Testament days, David's son, was just so frustrated by this. He said, life is meaningless. It's meaningless. What do I get from all my toil under the sun? From building and storing and earning and nothing. A person works their whole life, and at the end of it, there's this waste because they don't get to keep any of it. I did the work, but I don't get to keep the reward. Why do the work in the first place? Jesus elsewhere in the New Testament said, you can gain the whole world, yet in the end still lose. You can have all the assets there are to have, and yet in the end, despite being the most successful, incredible businessman, planner, finance guru, good with your budgeting, good with your investments, you can have it all, and yet in the end, you have to forfeit. You lose. You can gain the whole world, yet in the end, lose. Can you help me understand or come to a concise summary? What is the point of this farmer who turns out a fool? Some would say this story isn't really a problem about wanting and having, but it's just about bad timing. In fact, many people who don't have any connection to Jesus or Bible teaching at all sometimes take an approach to life which is all about the timing. They're frustrated with waste, like Solomon was. Why work and then die before you have a chance to enjoy it all? Now, what's the point if you work for stuff and then be dead and then somebody else gets your stuff or you don't get to enjoy it? So the problem, some might say, is it's just a matter of timing. You got to adjust your lifestyle to make sure you maximize the good stuff in it. This is called hedonism, where you optimize the pleasurable. You work for the stuff, and then you 100% enjoy the stuff. You suck the marrow out of life. And then after that, be dead. But since you're going to be dead, and you worked for this stuff, might as well enjoy it. And that's hedonism, and that seems to make much more sense than this fool who worked for the stuff and then died before he could benefit from it. He's kind of foolish that way. He should have lived as a hedonist, optimized for maximum efficiency, pleasure. A different approach to life, whether it's looking at that parable or just the real world, is that you're a fool if you choose to live any other lifestyle beside a Stoic one. Stoicism is really minimalist living. It's very focused on only the essentials. Live with less. You don't need all this other garbage. So don't do extra work to create all this extra waste only to be dead. In fact, do no extra work for extra waste. Just find the bare essentials and live a very focused, minimalist life. Only what you need, nothing fancy, nothing flashy, because in the end, all this extra stuff you store up, you lose it anyway. So don't invest the work to accumulate it. It's the same approach as hedonism, but instead of a hedonist saying, have lots of assets and use them all to fulfill what you want, the Stoic will say, reduce what you want and don't compile all these useless assets. But in the end, they both lead to a similar problem that was in the parable of the fool. See, this really isn't a matter of efficiency, of using your life so that there's not leftovers that somebody else gets to own, that you have to leave to somebody in your will or the probate court takes care of them. This isn't a story, is it, about justice. It's not about prayer. It's not about it's good to share. It's not about having a work ethic. It's not about saving. It's not about problem solving. It's not about planning. It's not about using your brain. It's not about growing grain. It's not about planning, storing, retiring, or refrigerators. There's something else which is at the heart of this. And we will all end up fools unless we end up with an answer to this. What does it mean to be rich toward God?